First up, Alicia Hook is going to tell us what Juice did. Good evening. But you do have to talk into the microphone, not near it, into it. Okay.
Typically, a lot of cold fronts stall out midway through the state, and there are areas that are unaffected, and that affects how electric generation is supplied across the state. If there are areas where there's not as much demand, it can make up a gap. This covered the entire state. Another item that I think is critical to remember is the entire ERCOT grid was about 4 minutes and 37 seconds from total blackout. If that had occurred, we would probably still today not have power across the state in certain areas. Pockets would have been restored fairly quickly, and other pockets would have taken longer. So the rolling blackouts, as difficult as they were to get through, were a critical tool that was used to preserve the entire system from a complete blackout. See if I can not move in, Carol. Oh, did I do that? Okay, so I'm gonna touch on three major points on the next couple of slides. That the three major contributors to the overall crisis that we saw in Texas as a result of this event. And there's a fourth item that I didn't do a separate slide on. I did a slide on local impact, but it's something that I'll just bring up front, and that is that all of this has culminated in a financial crisis in the electric sector like has never been seen before. I'm sure you have heard in the news about the co-op that's filed bankruptcy, another co-op that's petitioned the PUC and ERCOT to suspend any invoices and payments due, and a number of retail electric providers that have filed for bankruptcy or are in default at this time. So there's a huge financial crunch from the huge energy bills that were generated by all of the factors that led to the excessive pricing of energy and energy services in ERCOT during this event. So, as I mentioned, just going through my bullets here, you know, this event impacted the entire state. We saw historical peak loads. We saw those locally here on our system. On Sunday, February 14th, we recorded a load of 102 megawatts. And to put that into perspective, last year's summer peak was 110 megawatts, and our prior winter peak was 78 megawatts. So we shattered our previous peak load records.
Hold up a second, Alicia.
Yes, sir.
Let's see if Sue Ann's all right. Sue Ann, a lot of people make a dramatic entrance, but you top the bill.
Oh, no. Okay.
Okay, continue.
Okay. As I was saying, we shattered our previous winter peak on Juice's system, and ERCOT-wide, well, let me say what our estimated peak was during this event. So based on the best information that we could gather to forecast what our load would have been had we have not been subject to load shed. We estimate our load would have been within the 125 megawatt range, which would exceed our all-time system peak. So ERCOT is a summer peaking system. In ERCOT and in Texas, we have hot summers. Cold winters are rare. Cold winters like this are rare. But all of the electrical emergency heat that was on during that event was a huge contributor to that. Space heaters and strip heaters require a lot of electricity. And we're seeing a lot of growth in the state and not a lot of growth in natural gas to new homes. A lot of new homes are being built all electric. And so I think we're seeing some of that transfer over into our peaks in the wintertime. Another thing about winter peak in the summer, you have peaks that will go up, when it's really hot, and then they calm down at night. But during this event, that cold was relentless. So we saw loads stay fairly steady all around the clock. So on top of the historical peak demand on the system, there were generation issues throughout every type of generating resource. And those varied from operational issues, such as equipment freezing and equipment tripping offline, to a lack of natural gas supplies for a lot of the natural gas generation. ERCOT is heavily reliant on natural gas at this point in its evolution to supply electricity. And so the lack of natural gas was a huge contributing factor. And they had their own challenges, and I won't speak to those. As far as the renewables, they had their challenges as well. They're not built to operate in Texas like they are, in the northern states. They're built to withstand heat, not extreme cold. And this chart just shows that gap between supply and demand that we experienced during this event. So as this developed, customers were rotated off for extended periods of time across the state. And this created a huge amount of suffering for customers who some were shut off from the entire event. And there were a number of challenges that led to that. We were fortunate here that we were able to manage the rotating outages, I think, as best as any utility could have managed those. But for other systems, some experienced impacts from icing. We didn't have that in Greenville this time, thankfully. With all the trees here in Greenville, that can be a huge challenge when we get a cold weather event and we have icing on trees that end up falling into lines, and that would have severely hampered our efforts to rotate outages. And then, of course, the huge energy bills for those customers who were on variable rate or wholesale rate energy plans. As those prices floated with the market, they went up, and they went up fast, and they stayed up. I've read many stories about that, and just a lot of people I don't think who understood the plans that they signed up for. And they've been great for many years while prices were low and even negative for periods. And these are, people who've been on these plans for a while that brag to their friends and neighbors about how cheap their bills were. But this event came a lot and reversed all of that in a very short period of time. So I'll talk about our local system. Again, no ice, that was a huge factor. We maintained critical services, and, critical services were essentially the hospital, the main water treatment plant, and Juice's operations center, where we operate the equipment throughout the system. We were able to switch load around to minimize the load on the feeders that fed those critical facilities so that we could rotate outages more evenly across the city and throughout all of the available circuits, to do that in the most fair manner possible. We staffed employees for the critical services on both the electrical and the internet side. Internet was a challenge during rotating outages because their equipment is sensitive to that off and on. And also, there were periods where a segment was switched off where a node set, and the customers were downstream of that, and they had power, but their internet didn't work because the actual device controlling it was switched off. We also maintained beyond the 24-hour service for our field crews and our generating plant. We also maintained 24-hour customer service. Our concern was that customers whose neighborhoods had been re-energized would have a blown fuse or something along those lines, and there would be no one to take that call, and they would sit with their power off until, something could get through the system on Monday. That was not acceptable. So we staffed that 24 hours during the event. We also worked very hard to keep the community updated and updated that frequently through our social media, and also issued a few press releases along the way. So regarding the financial impacts, we significantly offset the energy cost with our local generation and obviously with our diverse energy portfolio. That allowed us to have some insulation from the ERCOT market, but some energy services were significantly higher, and unfortunately we didn't have protection from those. And those are the costs that we'll be talking about at the public hearing at the Juice Operations Center on March 11th. The energy cost in the ERCOT market ballooned from $4.2 billion to $50.6 billion during this period. And Juice is going to be seeking short-term funding for some of those energy costs. And really, it was the energy services. You may have heard some discussion in the media about ancillary services and the pricing. There's a lot of price about energy as well, but energy was capped at $9,000 a megawatt. Ancillary services were not capped, and we saw multiple intervals that settled over $20,000 a megawatt. And although we require a lot less in ancillary services, the cost was significant. I just wanted to touch quickly on our generation portfolio, talking about diversity. We have renewables, and while those had challenges during this event, they also produced during a lot of periods throughout this event. We were able to produce energy with our local generating plant on fuel oil, and that was indeed a blessing for the Greenville community to have locally owned assets and be able to produce when so many assets were not able to. That helped us offset cost significantly. So the other tool that we use is power purchase agreements. These are fixed price agreements, and we do have a couple of those in place. We also purchase from the ERCOT market in those periods where we don't have resources or agreements that cover the full amount of our load. So how does this all come together and impact Juice customers' bills? So I'll reiterate again, I know our board chair has voiced her commitment that customers will not see a large spike in their rates. The way that Municipal utilities managed rates is long-term stability. So there are a lot of different strategies that we can employ to mitigate the impact of this event. And of course, the board will be reviewing our financial plan and what we can do differently to help absorb the cost of this event. Right now, there are a lot of unknowns about where this pricing is going to settle. There's still discussions of energy price adjustments and ancillary service adjustments. And we certainly support and hope that those ancillary service prices are adjusted by ERCOT or the PUC, and that there's sufficient pressure to make that happen. We're also working to minimize costs through every means possible. We're working with members of the legislature. We're looking at all the legal filings and how would those apply to juice, and are there any legal remedies for any of the rules as they're currently structured? Also through the regulatory process and supporting those pleas for any type of rate repricing that would help lower the cost for juice customers. Like I said, the objective for juice is to manage cost over the long term. And part of our work ahead of us as staff is to present options to the juice board for ways to offset this cost. The other tool that we still have in our toolkit is our local generation. And we have done a lot of work over the last few years on our generating units to make those units more reliable. And they've performed, and I'm going to knock on wood, very well over last summer and over this winter event. Our unit that was operated flawlessly. So we will take advantage of every opportunity that's presented in the market to generate with our local generating resources to help offset that cost. And if 2021 is like 2011, we're in for a hot summer. And last, I'll just point out we're a public power community here in Greenville. And that means that the local utility is here for the people. Everything we do is to try to create the best service that we can provide, the most reliable and the most cost-effective service for the citizens of Greenville. We do not operate for profit. We're a public power utility. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Anybody have any questions for Alicia? I've got a couple of questions. You had a reduction in the amount of gas that you could use. How much power did that curtail you from producing?
So we were able to produce 30 megawatts on fuel oil. Gas was curtailed to 0 at our plant. Our transportation was curtailed to 0, and that represents approximately 70 megawatts.
So you lost 70 megawatts that you could have had you had plenty of gas.
Yes, sir.
When you had the rolling blackouts, I believe that you rotated them around throughout the city with the exception of like the hospital. Did you find that that was pretty consistent across all neighborhoods and things like that?
Yes, sir. We rotated every feeder with the exception of critical load feeders. We also had feeders that are equipped with under frequency load shedding, and we're required to maintain under frequency load shedding capability. That's the last gasp to save the transmission grid when frequency begins to drop. After I believe it was at some point during the second day of the event. I believe it was day 2. My days run together a little bit, but ERCOT did authorize us to add stage 3 under frequency equipped relays with, allowed us to add those to the rotation. So at that point, we spread that net out a little farther. But yes, we consistently went through those relays and cycled them in a very ordered fashion.
So when you say under frequency, everybody's used to getting 60 cycle power. So if it drops, how much before that affects you, and does that cause your generators and stuff to go offline, or what's the effect of a reduction in
right
frequency?
So I do not have those numbers with me. I probably have someone sitting in the audience.
I'm just looking for general idea. I don't need the exact
yeah,
numbers.
59.4, I believe, was the lowest, and might have cycled down to 59.3. And at that point was when a lot of the generation started tripping offline. And that's whenever we entered the danger zone, really, for the blackout of the grid. There's a very tight band there.
So if your system drops a half a cycle or a cycle, that causes your generators to kick off or your systems to kick offline?
Right. I mean, there's protective relaying that will operate to disconnect elements of the system to prevent damage. Everything's designed to operate at 60.
Yeah, my house designed to keep me warm too, but that didn't also work. You identified that you were able to look at the market and do some advanced planning. Could you enhance on that, please? As far as being able to buy ahead and those kinds of things?
Sure. So about 2 weeks out from the event, we started reviewing our load forecast and looking at the weather forecast and trying to really pinpoint what we believed our load would look like. That's an exercise we go through on a regular basis. We do it on a seasonal basis, we do it on an annual basis, and we do it on a daily basis. But as we started to get reports that there was a significant weather event that was moving towards Texas, we started looking at what our position was. So one of the things that we know is that gas is curtailed to our plant anytime temperatures reach freezing. So that's always a preparation that we know we have to make in advance of a freezing event. So we reviewed what we believed our load would be. We assessed the gap in energy. We looked at ancillary services. We attempted to purchase ancillary services in advance of the event, but there was no sellers. There was a lot of risk associated with supplying those services, and no one was willing to sell those, even 2 weeks out from the event. So what we did end up doing is purchasing additional energy because we believed our load would exceed our normal, winter peak capacity for an event, freezing event. And so we supplemented with some bilateral contracts prior to the event. We also made arrangements to get some emergency repairs done on our fuel oil piping on our steam unit 3 out at our generating plant, and got ready to start that unit up on fuel oil and got staffing. I mean, staffing was another, area that we supplemented during that pre-planning event.
Anybody have any other questions? Jerry?
Yeah, I think it would be nice if you would tell the council and tell the people in the audience that there were some very, very positive comments from the general manager at Denton Power and Light, or whatever they're called, and also from the governor during this period about the way Juice managed this storm. And would you like to talk about that? I know you probably don't want to toot your own horn, but
Talk about that, Sue.
Sue, you're welcome to
So-
come up and
well, they were very positive. So
Yes, sir. We did receive some, words of compliment from other utilities around. Texas one of the former general managers at Denton, called us to say, "Hey, you guys have a great story to tell. It's really incredible what you've done in Greenville," and had a lot of positive support from the community. The governor did tag one of our social media posts. In fact, it was, I believe, the letter from our chairman and myself to the community. And, or no, actually, it was the article that ran in Herald Banner that said rates would not be impacted by this event. We also got another tag by Brian Slayton. So there were people around that took notice that Greenville came through this well.
anything else, Jerry?
no, thank you.
Anybody else? Alicia, Sue Ann, I'd like to compliment you on the work that the entire board and Juice in particular did. We could have been in a lot worse shape, and the bills could have been astronomical, but the way that you planned your team and got your team together, I know that there was a lot of efforts that were done that you haven't highlighted here. One of them was getting diesel fuel, and you had to go clear out of state to get it in order to keep the engines running. I'd like to say thank you from the city for everything that you did and worked around the clock to get us as fair and as much power as possible. So thank you, and a very well done, and please pass that to all your staff and all your workers. Some of those people I know were out there working around the clock, sleeping at work, and I had no desire to be out there in the cold, but they were out there working hard, and you've put together an excellent team. So thank you very much, and congratulations on a job well done.
Thank you.
Okay, next is from Atmos, Elizabeth Litat. Beth, you're going to have to do it again. Datamo?
It's a rough last name. It's Dotomo, to help you.
She's the Atmos Public Affairs Manager.
So thank you, Mayor. I know we had a conversation and for inviting me as well with the council members this evening to talk about our response and performance during the winter storm. I'll be brief, and then I know there has been some questions that come up, so I'll just be brief about how we handled our responses here locally. And then if you have any additional questions, of course, I'll be happy to answer what we can. We have a little over 1 million customers in our mid-tex division, which is what we fall under. And we were able to maintain that service, safe and reliable service to those customers throughout the storm. Our priority under how we're governed through the Railroad Commission is to keep those human needs customers on. And we didn't have any interruptible service. In the electric industry, you can do the blackouts, and we call them sometimes brownouts in the natural gas world, but that isn't a feasible solution for us to keep one on to save another. The way gas meters work, you probably know, is we have to go turn them on and off physically, and then you have to relight them. So for us to not maintain an area or lose a whole area would result in hours and hours of physical people going. And so it's the reason that we try to maintain those full human needs all at one level and not having to piecemeal how we're going to turn people on and off. in order to maintain that service, we did curtail our industrial customers and transport customers. That is different than Juice's contract. So I want to be clear that we did curtail the industrial and transport customers, whereas Juice has a interruptible contract. They're two different tones for us. We did do that under a Railroad Commission order the Saturday before it was issued then, and we curtailed them to 0% production unless they had plant protection with us. And that was done, the original order was done through Friday, and then on Thursday, they released a new order that went through Tuesday the 23rd. We did not keep them off through Tuesday. We allowed them to come back on the system on Sunday, some of them on Saturday, depending on how their load was for safe pressure in our system. Once we lifted that order, we were able to continuously maintain as well, bringing those back on. So additionally, for instance, school districts in our area, we did ask some of them scale back if you can. Some of the larger school systems have, probably what you have in city buildings or even at your home where you can electronically control those. And so they put them down. But some of them had to go manually in and helped us on our system to do that as well. And so we asked them, can you reduce your heat while you're not using your buildings this entire week or anything like that? And so we brought all of those back on at a regular rate as well, those that were voluntarily complying with us. We did do several social media posts as well, and thank you very much to you guys as well for helping us get those out. We can't get to every customer, and sometimes they look at our city leadership and chamber leaderships to get their information. And so we did ask for conservation during that time continuously, and so I certainly appreciate that you all are willing to share that information for us as well. We have also talked about billing, and I do have a handout here that I can leave with you all to look at customer billing. We do not set the cost of gas prices. We're working with our regulators as well, but we have committed as well to our citizens and commercial customers that their rates will not hike during this time. So they will see an unusually higher bill, in the April to May timeframe when those start to hit, and that's based on usage. As you guys just previously discussed, the homes that do have natural gas, and we're seeing people they were running their gas fireplaces, or if they didn't have an electronic ignition furnace, it was running to keep up with the temperature. So, of course, they will see a little bit higher just on the usage side, but not on the price side. So we are also working with our legislators. We filed legislation this week as well to talk about the discussions as it relates to price. So I will leave you with those. I'll be happy to answer any additional questions if you do have based on how we performed during that time. But I do know that we did not lose any human needs customers as we are relied upon through the Railroad Commission to do so.
I have a couple of questions. You identified the interruptible service or interruptible
Contract. Mm-hmm.
How did you phrase it?
It's they have an interruptible clause in their contract.
How do we get rid of that so that they continue to get the power?
So all of the power plants that we have that clause in there.
Why?
It is to supply they are on the city gate, what we call the city gate, that feeds the entire town of Greenville and beyond. And so to maintain reliable and safe pressures and system load, it's a clause that we have in there, and it's a legal clause that's allowed to be in there. I have committed with Alicia. We have a call next Thursday with myself, and then we have an electric marketing manager that kind of looks at those to see what we can do on the contract side of it and just talk about the system load. But based on the pipeline that feeds that right now, that is what is safe and reliable for that service.
It seems a little strange that you stop the gas going to the electric company because you want to keep the pilot light so that people can keep their heaters going, but they get the heater working, but they can't generate any heat in the house because the electricity is cut off. It seems like it's a backward cycle there.
Well, I can see how you can make that configuration, but in order to maintain the pressure, an example could be if you had just kept that going, and I don't have the loads, and the pressure, but if you had just kept that going continuously, and then, like they talked about the ERCOT grid, had that cut off, then we would lose the whole town, and I don't even know for how long that would happen. So to maintain the critical needs of the individual residents and then our critical care customers, hospitals, nursing homes, and other care like that, it was necessary to do that at that time.
Is there a plan for Atmos to increase the size of the pipelines or something? I mean, I've been mayor for 6 years, and Atmos has come forward for 6 years and asked for a rate increase, even though the
Correct.
price of natural gas has gone way down.
Well,
But yet,
to be
when
fair,
we need additional gas, you're saying your pipelines are limited in what you can furnish. And I'm concerned about, one, what is Atmos doing to improve that? And two, as the city expands and we get more industry, but more importantly, more homes, what is your plan to improve your overall capability to handle a bigger population?
Well, I think you're asking a good question, but to be fair, it's two really different issues, unfortunately. Our supply and pressure today, and I also brought Benny Campbell, that is our marketing manager, to come up and speak to your growth if you'd like to go to that direction, because that's a different direction for us. We can supply the growth and the development of pressure and load here. Alicia also touched on, for instance, all these new home builders are putting in electric homes. We talk to every single one of those builders as they come through, and most of them tell us we don't want our customers to have an additional service to their home. So if there was if there was an additional help that we could have on that end when we talk to those builders and encouraging natural gas in homes, that would help as well. But we're talking about two different things to talk about during the storm, with the supply and load coming into the electric plant, and then just our regular everyday supply and load and how we can service that industry.
I guess I don't see why it's different. I mean, if you can't furnish the power plant, but you can only furnish the ones that on the residential, and to do that, to keep those pilot lights lit, which I understand totally, to keep those lit, then as we get another 1,000, 2,000, 5,000 people here, you're going to have a lot more homes, and not all of those will be electric. So the question is, if your system now will just barely handle the residents that we have right now, what is the plan for Atmos to increase the capability to handle a much bigger population?
Well, the system doesn't barely handle it right now. In fairness, every day we operate just fine. This was a one-time event for 1 week that hasn't happened since 1980.
But we see the same thing in the summer, when there's big spikes and everything else. So it's not just a one-time every 50 years. Yes, the winter storm that we had was for a one time in a long, long time. But we see major uses and major needs in the summer as well.
Correct.
But that probably doesn't affect you because people don't have their
Correct.
fireplaces on.
But we still have maintained the system on a regular basis, on an everyday basis. That hasn't changed. And we have, and I want to go back also to your point about the rate increase. Well, we have done pipeline replacements, and that's what that funds. So we have done pipeline replacements, and we have several coming forward still. And we work really closely, even with your public works departments, every time, they have a street project or something, us to go in and upgrade that pipeline or replace that pipeline. So in addition to just our own replacements and upgrades, we also partner with the city, and all of that comes back on our cost. And so to be a better understanding, that's where that rate increase is passed along to pay for those replacements and upgrades. It's not just a every year thing, we just increase the rate just to increase it. That it's for those replacement and upgrade projects that we do in those communities. And we've done quite a few in Greenville to justify that cost. And I'd be happy to get that back to you if you want to talk about that further. I'd be happy to do that.
Well, it just looks like that being a for-profit company, which I think Atmos is, that running your organization and expanding the pipelines and replacing old pipelines and things is part of your normal O&M, and that wouldn't necessarily justify rate increase every year. I could see it occasionally,
Okay,
but we routinely get it on a yearly basis.
correct.
And anybody else have any questions for us? Jerry?
Is the line going that serves Greenville residences different than the line that serves the utility, or is it all just one?
We've got several lines that feed the town of Greenville, so it just depends on kind of where we're located in the city on which line is coming in to service them. So, yeah, I mean, no, it's not just one line feeding the town.
So the line that feeds the power plant also is serving residences also, is that right? Okay, and then if I'm an industrial customer that absolutely depends on uninterruptible power,
Right.
did you imply that I could purchase have a contract where I have uninterruptible gas supply?
No, so curtailment and industrial customers have a different contract.
Okay.
So they do not operate on the electric generation plants are interruptible contract customers. So if you ask me what customers are curtailed, juice is not on that list, because in a state of emergency under the Railroad Commission, we have curtailment that we are allotted legally under their order. So an industrial customer, if there's in any instance, and again, we haven't done a curtailment at all at any level since 1980. However, if the curtailment order came in and we said you have to cut production at 50%, some plants may have a plant protection that they have purchased to where they can use so much MCF per day. I'd have to go back and look to see if anybody in Greenville did, because
Okay.
I covered kind of a gamut of area for our curtailment as well. And I don't remember off the top of my head, but they can, and some of them will do that. For instance, if they've got something critical. I did have one industry, it was up in our Paris area, that they've got raw material, for instance, that solely responds only on being heated through natural gas. So if they were to lose that, for instance, that they lose their whole production, right? So they purchase plant protection to just keep that on. And also, to be honest, in all of our curtailment conversations, we did tell all the customers, I mean, please, reasonably heat your building. We don't want those turned off.
Right.
That's not what it is. It was on the production side only.
Well, we just heard that, gas curtailment or whatever happy word you
Sure.
put on it was costing us about 70 megawatts a day and an hour. And I certainly hope that in these conversations you're having, we can get back to some kind of reliability with regard to our generation.
We are going to look at that, and like I said, we've got that call scheduled for next week, and seeing what we can do, based on the load and the size of that line.
Okay.
And the main thing again is that we want it to be safe and reliable. If we just say, oh, go ahead and do it because we want you to have 70 megawatts of power, we want to make sure that we can ensure to you that it is safe and reliable in getting there, and that it's not a non-steady pressure or that it's not a safe pressure. That has to happen in order for those conversations to come to fruition.
Well, is it possible to have a conversation with those requirements now?
That's what we're going to do. That's what we've got set
Okay.
up for next week. Yes, sir. Absolutely.
You said the Railroad Commission, and I think I misunderstood.
Okay.
They said you could curtail, or they told you to curtail?
I have the order here. I brought, it was an order to
So
curtail.
they order you to curtail? That's all I was
And
asking.
the order
I
again-
don't need to see the order.
Okay, yeah, I brought it just in case anybody asked, but, and I brought both because one was through Friday, that question came to me as well, and then it was additionally extended through that following Tuesday, which we did not go through Tuesday. We went through Sunday.
And you identified that the residents should not see a rate increase, but they may see a usage increase, which if you use more, I understand you got to pay more. That goes without saying.
Yeah.
What process did you use to winterize? I mean, as you watch all the news, all
Yeah,
the
that's a
power
good
plants are a bunch of sloppy people because they didn't winterize
Winterize.
anything.
Yeah.
But I haven't heard anybody identify about any of the gas companies' winterization, and I've heard about valves being frozen shut and they
Yeah.
couldn't produce it, and
Great.
so,
So I can't speak to the supplier side, where is probably what you heard, where the valves were frozen. So I don't work for those suppliers,
I'm
I don't
more
know, but I
interest-
can tell you what we did.
I'm interested in what you've done as far
So
as
we've
supplying
got-
power here.
Okay, so we've got several valve stations, and we put those guys as well for 8 or 9 days on 12-hour shifts. They worked 4 a.m. to 4 p.m. and sat on those valves to monitor the pressure and ensure that they did not freeze over and would continuously produce the flow going through those. So they do go through a system where the gas flows, and to ensure that those valves, weren't iced over or snowed over when that weather came through. Those guys sat there 4 a.m. to 4 p.m. and then 4 p.m. to 4 a.m. They swapped out shifts, 12-hour shifts that they did around the clock for that entire time.
Okay. So you had people on there looking at those
Absolutely.
valves and
Absolutely. And we had all of our crews out there, to be honest, Mayor. You're still experiencing regular things. People are saying, "Oh, my pilot light's out," or "I'm not sure I'm getting regular flow." And we did not non-take customer calls through our dispatch center. We still maintained that service and sent our service techs out there. And if they were having an issue with pressure, we checked those pressures. I even got calls from a couple cities that said, "Our police station, we're not sure we're getting the right pressure." We went out there and made sure that they had what they needed to maintain their critical care. So we worked around the clock, just like the other utility companies, to making sure that people were safe.
anybody have any other questions?
I do. In terms of city of Greenville, do you know on, say, an average day, what % capacity the system runs at?
I don't, and I can get that answer to you if you're asking on a residential or a commercial side.
I mean, system as a whole applied to Greenville. And then the second part of the question is, at what % capacity were we operating during the worst part of the storm?
Yeah, I don't know that, and that's going to be a varied question, but I can get back to you.
Okay.
It's going to be varied because we have different types of customers, and some of it's proprietary. So, but I can get some of it.
I'm curious, during the storm, at what %, if we were at 100 or lower?
Sure, I can get you the information that's publicly available to you.
Okay.
Any other questions? Beth, I appreciate it, and I look forward to more discussions about your work and figuring out how we can get around this reduction in gas to the utility.
Absolutely.
70 megawatts, my numbers may be off, but that would provide power to about 34,000 homes. And some people went without power for a long time. I'm not saying that our 70 megawatts would have made that difference, but as bad as the power was, 70 would have helped.
Sure, I can understand that, and I respect that completely. I know all of our TMPA cities were in a similar situation. So, but we have talked about it internally, and Alicia and I have as well. And so we're gonna have that conversation next week to see, what's in our toolbox and what's in theirs, and how we can come together on that.
Okay, thank you
And I
very
will,
much.
just one last thing, Mayor, I will leave these, just if you guys do get any bill questions, there's a flyer here with just additional information about those. And we do provide funds in the city as well through some partner agencies to assist bills with customers. I'm happy to help them personally, or we can refer them as well.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Appreciate
Thank you very
showing up
much.
tonight. Okay, next we have Summer is going to tell us what the city did as far as the storm update.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I have a few slides to go through just to kind of tell you the impact that it made for us as a city and the services that we provided. So we'll go through this. How did it affect the city? So when you're thinking about it, when you look at the dates, it started February 10th, which was the Thursday before, and then went through several. Obviously, we had water treatment, pressure issues, and things like that. So it really went through the 17th for us and our crews when you really boil it down. Now, I will tell you during this whole presentation that you'll see, I do have some numbers on here. Just keep in mind those are estimates. We're still in the assessment phase of pretty much everything. One of those being our streets. We were in the middle of our paver analysis and those kind of things, and I think we'll be able to provide you with that information. But obviously, with the ice and the snow and the freezing and the melting and the freezing again, and those affects your asphalt and your concrete and your subbase and those kind of things. So Press and his team is definitely looking at that. We're aware of a lot of issues that we have on the streets. We're getting to those as quickly as we possibly can. Obviously, the storm amplified those and brought those to the surface a little bit quicker than we anticipated that they would be here. So, and especially for the amount of time that the storm did last. And so we're still in the assessment phase of a lot of our roads and things like that. But as far as, when you're talking water and those kind of things, I think most of these numbers that you'll see here are pretty accurate. And if we ever need an update down the line to give you another update, we can certainly do that. So just preparing for the storm. So this is just some pictures that some of my staff had taken beforehand. Just the empty shelves, people trying to take care of themselves and being at the house, and just realizing that these employees are having to take care of things at their home as well. And so just kind of wanted to show you kind of some of those pictures that, and even 2 weeks after the storm was over, the shelves still didn't look this bare, but there were still some things that were lacking. And that, that's due to road conditions, and production had gone the wrong direction. So just a few pictures of Greenville. There's a couple, one is the park there, one's on Joe Ramsey, just a record low temperatures. And the thing I think to point out, when Alicia and both Beth were talking, it was the length of time that temperature was at. So when you're thinking about those, that's really, when you see these numbers, that's really impressive as to what our staff did for that long amount of time. Usually here in Texas, you get 1 or 2 days of cold, not a whole entire week or almost week and a half of record low temperatures, and in snowfall as well. So thinking about that. So when we're talking about our facilities, we were actually in pretty good shape at our facilities. Our building maintenance crew did an exceptional job of being on top of our buildings. I know I had several comments that they saw those building maintenance trucks at every single one of our facilities throughout the entire week. And those were people that were out and about. And so just a few things: a water line break at the Farmers Market building, $250 estimated there. We had some damaged ceiling tiles due to roof damage at the library, which we knew that roof was in pretty bad shape already, which we've got it on our capital improvement plan. So that wasn't really too surprising. We had a pump that went out at the Wright Park Golf Course. We estimate that's going to be between $4,000 and $10,000. And then the various plumbing fixes at all the parks. We have all the restrooms there and all the plumbing issues that we have there. So there was a few of those that the parks crew had to go through, and that was about $3,000. So I would say all in all, facility-wise, we fared pretty well. Our facilities, all of them, with the exceptions of the ones that had generators, were on the rolling blackouts. And so we had some that were. And so being able to keep, everything going, nothing major, no flooding or anything, issues like that we had, was a testament to our building crew that just really stayed on top of everything, in my opinion. So in talking about Public Works, they were pretty busy for that week. So they utilized 74.2 tons of sand to de-ice the roads. And if you'll remember, that ice started on the 10th, on that Thursday before, it snowed on that Sunday. So they really kind of started de-icing and sanding roads, making sure the critical areas, the hospital was taken care of, the ambulance service was taken care of, the police station, the fire stations, and things like that. So they really concentrated on those areas first, and then went to the heavily traveled roads that they went to when they could, if they could get to those. Utilities, the utility crews fixed 15 main breaks, which, looking back on it, is really not that many in a week, And so when you hear on the news that some of those are fixing hundreds, and some of those are still fixing water breaks from the storm, I think, we fared out pretty well with our main breaks. We had just for that week, we had over 600 calls for residents, water on and off due to broken pipes. So they went on 600 calls, which is an increased amount of calls for that week. Wastewater treatment utilized 73 hours of generator use. So they were able to run their generator off of diesel fuel. So we were in good shape there. We did have to refuel that generator at some point, but luckily our supplier was able to supply it to us. and during the end of that week. So it lasted and it did its job, that generator did. So it did pretty well. And our water treatment pushed through 9 million gallons per day of water. At our peak usage, we can be anywhere from 8 to 11 MGDs. And so pushing out 9 MGDs, obviously people were, probably dripping their faucets and things like that. So that's an increased amount of use during the winter time. And it was really, really, really helpful. It really saved us when Juice helped us out on that put us on that critical feeder that we didn't have rolling back blackouts. And they also, I do want to point out to Juice that they did, before we were on that feeder, they did dedicate a person to, we were on the rolling blackouts for a couple hours, that our water treatment facility was, and they dedicated a person to be out there to physically help us out on and off on that. And so they did do that. After those couple of hours, they got us on that single feeder after we were in line, and then we were in pretty good shape after that. So we do appreciate Juice doing that for us. That was super, super helpful. You can see some of the pictures of the guys out there, and I'm going to recognize them a little bit later, but in the sub-zero temperatures, they're still down digging in the dirt, working on the generators, and still doing their job. They didn't miss a beat. So just a estimated financial impact, we had about 755 overtime hours. That was mainly on the public works side. That cost turned out to be about $23,000. Right now, it's estimated we have about 32,000 in street repairs, and that's just kind of our normal maintenance kind of things. We do have, I don't know if you guys have driven down Roy Warren, the part that's there's pieces that you can't drive down it right now. So if you want to add in that cost to replace that right now, we've got an estimate on that. It's anywhere between $1.5 and $1.8 million to fix Roy Warren. So I don't really attribute that to just the storm, because I think, there was some things going on beforehand, but if you add that in, that's another 1.8 of one of our major collector roads that is used over there. So so we're going to have to deal with that in the next couple months to be able to get that taken care of. And then otherwise, between parts and repair costs, it was about $18,000. So all in all, with all the costs, estimated it would cost us about $90,000 additional. So just to tell you a little bit how we tried to communicate with the community as best we could, we had several people working on making sure. So in that week, we had 23 press releases sent. 6 were translated to Spanish. We answered about 138 questions on Messenger, plus many other questions outside of Messenger, which Public Works was very vital in helping us answer those questions that we didn't know. There was 70,758 total people reached from social media posts. We also utilized our Code Red system when we were under the boil water notice to be able to get that out to people a little bit faster. And so there was 18,292 phone calls. There was 29,959 attempted calls, and then 8,876 numbers were reached by Code Red. So just a few little stats there that we came through. And I just wanted to share with you guys, I know Public Works doesn't always get a lot of praise for the things. They work a lot behind the scenes and don't get a lot of praise, but social media comments, there was several of them, and if you'll just see up there, a couple of them just said, "You rock," they were amazing, thank you. Over one to the right was, their Public Works, an employee's wife commented, thank you to the city of Greenville, and we were just appreciative of that. So it's just really nice to get those comments and feedback from the citizens. We really appreciate it when they're out there, and we can share that with our people to let them know, hey, you are doing a great job. So just wanted to share that with you guys, that was on there. Far as our first responders go, I wanted to point out with our fire department, they had an increase in call volume of 58% compared to 5-year average. They had an unusual number of calls, obviously, for water breaks, which included sprinkler systems and domestic water lines inside businesses and homes. So it wasn't just our dispatch in Public Works getting those water line breaks called, it was a fire department as well. They took several calls of people needing drinking water and people running low on oxygen supplies that they service those people. And they also supplied the hospital with water to their boilers 24 hours a day for 5 days straight. And that's through filling up a truck, taking it over there, filling up, and giving them water. So they did that for 24 hours a day, 5 days our firefighters did. And then from the police department, there's just some of the conditions and pictures that they had when they were on patrol. Obviously, there was the law enforcement issues were down a little bit, but they were still very busy with, people sliding off into ditches and helping people do those kind of things. Traffic was a little bit more sketchy than it normally is on the roads. But they still found a way to provide uninterrupted service to our citizens. So they were still serving and patrolling and doing the things that they were supposed to do. So I'm really happy that they were, even in the conditions that they faced. So just talk about how did the city survive? And I put up here because we have great people. I'm not going to read each one of these names, but I would like to. I do think some of them are out there. I think they're hiding back here. So if y'all can come in for a second. I just want you guys to understand these were the guys from the utility department, which includes water distribution and wastewater collection. And these were the guys that actually took care of everything. Those are the guys in the pictures. They were in the trenches every single day for that entire week, fixing those water breaks and things like that. So I just wanted them to come, and I appreciate them coming because a lot of them try to hide and don't come. So thank you guys to them, and I just wanted them to be recognized. So if y'all can recognize them, I appreciate it. They were working 24 hours a day. I was on the phone with some of them throughout those hours, and they just didn't miss a beat. And I just want you guys to realize it. And I've told most of them, but I appreciate them for what they did. And we're in pretty good shape because of these guys standing right behind us. I don't see any gals here.
Well, thank you very much for all the work that you did and the dedication that you made. We've got a town that's got about over 30,000 people in it, and it's because of the efforts that you did during this severe storm that they survived as good as they did. So thank you very much.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate it coming. Oh, there's the phone. I see you. So just to recognize some others, we also had from the water treatment plant, the wastewater treatment plant, streets and traffic. I think I don't know if we've got any of those guys. I think some of them are hiding back there. Traffic is hiding back there. On the engineering side, we had some people. So this is basically our public works that really served us in that suit. So wastewater treatment plant, we had zero issues with them. The generator kicked in out there. We were in great shape. And that's because and I just talked to Bill earlier this week, and he said that's because we had upgraded that plant, and we were in, our wastewater treatment plant obviously is a lot newer than our water treatment plant, so we fared a little bit better when talking about that. And then some other people I would like to recognize. I don't know if any of them here. We've got our building maintenance crew, our fleet crew. I think some of them are up here. Our police officers, there's two in particular that were pointed out. Our information technology guys, I think I see Keith and Steve. Timothy's out in the audience hiding out there as well.
Tell them to all come up.
All right, y'all come up. He made the word. Come on, Chad. Don't be shy.
You need to be recognized.
Everybody that
for
you
the
see
work
up
that
here,
you did.
building maintenance, from our PR crew, our HR. So all these people were instrumental. I do want to tell one story that that week actually turned out to be a payroll week, so we had to run payroll. So obviously we run that every 2 weeks, so it's every other week. Well, it turns out that our IT had to keep our servers going in order to get our payroll process through our whole financial system and those kind of things. And one of our payroll people was working from home because she couldn't get to the office, and she was actually doing payroll right next to her husband while she drove him to dialysis when doing dialysis. So for me, that's above and beyond, and making sure, and those two ladies made sure everybody got paid on time. They didn't skip a beat, and everything went right through. As far as communicating, our fleet guys kept our fleet going. Like I told you before, our building guys, those three guys up there that were mentioned, they did an exceptional job of keeping all our facilities in great shape, and now I don't have to come ask you guys for money to repair things, so it makes me feel a little bit better. And so I just want to recognize them, so if you guys could give them a hand, I would appreciate that too. So thank you guys. So thank y'all. Okay, and I want to just say too, another reason I think we survived is because we have great partnerships. Mayor, you mentioned, or Jerry, I think you mentioned about the governor. Here's the governor's post that I put up here. When the governor recognizes that Juice is doing something good, I think you're on the right path. And Alicia and I were in constant contact, and she was very helpful in providing us what we needed to keep our critical services going. So I want to thank her for being there and helping me out and being able to do my job. And just having that great partnership and that communication was very vital. Not only, did her and I communicate, but her PR person and mine communicated as well and trying to answering questions because they were getting questions about city services. We were getting questions about Juice. And so just being able to have that was just very critical in being able to serve the citizens and not have any interrupted service. So I want to thank Juice for that. And then one more partner I do want to mention is Waste Connections. I know, they weren't really critical during the storm, but what really impressed us was that week after the storm, they got us back to normal in a week. I know it had been a while for some, between trash and recycling, and there was just so much, people were at home, so there was a lot more trash to pick up, but they were working from sun up to sundown. And they were constantly, in contact with myself as well, like, hey, what's going on? Where are you guys at? And just really, and there's some social media posts that I shared, and I'll share this presentation with you guys so you can see it, but it was just nice to be able to get those. They don't always get any kind of recognition, but I certainly do appreciate what they did for us to get us back to normal where we were, so. And then just want to say thank you to all the City of Greenville employees. I know, I didn't bring them all up here, but, everybody did their part. From my standpoint, we had a lot working from home and continue to work from home when they were able to. The power out, the rolling blackouts created a little bit of issues, but other than that, we were able to not skip a beat. Our IT guys helped our people working from home. So I just want to say thank you to all the Greenville, City of Greenville employees, all of them. Thank you to our partners, the ones I've mentioned. The citizens were really great in being patient with us and helping us out and being able to provide, hey, we've got this going on. We can't be everywhere all the time. And so them to just communicate with us is very helpful. And, they were patient and, when things were, going wrong, they were sticking up for us like, hey, they're doing the best they can. So we really just want to thank the citizens of Greenville. And then we want to thank City Council, for giving us the right tools to be able to do those kind of things. If we didn't have those tools, we wouldn't be able to serve, and I think it takes everybody, honestly. And I think, when you look at the neighboring cities, you see all the news, the horror stories on the news. We weren't one of those, and I think it's really honestly because the people that we have here in the city, working for the city and in the city, being able to do that, I think it's just, like I put it there at the bottom, it's because the people that Greenville's a great place to live. And I think, I've been through a couple of, with our straight line winds / tornado that we had, and then obviously we've been through COVID, and then now we've been through this winter storm, and through every single one of that, and I'll say it till I'm blue in the face, it's because of the people of the shape that we're in. The people that work for us and the people that live here, the people that work for Juice, I mean, like she said, they were working around the clock to be able to continue to serve citizens. And I do want to mention, all while they had the same issues we had at our houses. The freezing temperatures, the freezing pipes and all, they had those same issues at the house, and here they are working for us 24 hours, 7 days a week. So I just want to say thank you to you guys and to all of them, and thank you guys for getting through. And I'll be happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Alicia, you left out one person as part that deserves a big thank you, and that's you.
Well, they make me look good.
With
so.
your leadership.
Well, thank you.
With your leadership and management style, you've been able to get a city staff and a city team working as a well-organized unit. I know that both you and Alicia, for that week, I doubt you got much sleep. You were working around the clock for all the people and solving problems. But your management and your leadership style was well demonstrated during this crisis. And I personally want to say thank you very much for the job you did. We're very fortunate to have you here in Greenville.
Well,
So
thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you very much. Thank you.
All right, at this time, unless anybody's got anything else, we will go out of work session. And we've got about 15 minutes until we will start the regular session at 6 o'clock.